All right, it's time to answer your questions. I haven't done one of these in a while, so a couple days ago, I put out the signal for some SF6 Q&A to answer your burning questions, and I got some really, thoughtful and sincere responses, like this, for example. Yeah, thanks. Good question. Good question. Thank you very much. And also like this, which I mean, this one doesn't even meet the minimum requirement of being a question. Thanks very much. Let's get to a good one. All right, so definitely real user says, should people subscribe to your YouTube channel, Mr. Broski? You're so handsome and cool, it only seems fair. They should. They should subscribe to my YouTube channel. And before people start accusing this of being a fake question that no one really asked, you can see right there that this person is at not Broski, which proves it can't possibly be me. Go do that. Anyway, let's let's get serious for a second. Let's answer some actual questions now. IDOM asks, do you think SF6 needs to be 3 out of 5, or do you think they should change it to be less volatile? I think SF6 is a volatile game for sure. I think we all agree on that by now. But I kind of think it's important to make a distinction between like a game being volatile and a game being unstable competitively. A good example of this is Marvel 3. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is an incredibly volatile game. You know, you can die in one hit. Your entire team can get killed in one interaction. There are 300% combos in that game. So it is a volatile game, but at the same time, it's stable. It's possible to be both. Marvel 3 is a relatively stable game. The best players in the world in that game will competitively win almost every time. So I'm using Marvel as an example, probably for IDOM's benefit here. So I do think the game is volatile, but I don't think it's unstable. But I absolutely agree. This game should be 3 out of 5 the whole way through. And but I guess finally, just before a bunch of people leap into my mentions to be like, so you're saying that TOs need to work like 10 hours extra for free? You think they've got infinite free time and resources to run 3 out of 5? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm obviously not saying all TOs need to be forced to run the game 3 out of 5, okay? All I'm saying is that where possible, we should aim to run 3 out of 5. If that's not logistically possible, if the TOs just can't run that, then that's fine. But if they have the capacity to run 3 out of 5, we should be running 3 out of 5. For example, UFA, which is Europe's biggest Street Fighter major, and also one of the CPT events this year, they wanted to run it 3 out of 5. If given the choice, they would have run it 3 out of 5. But unfortunately, Capcom enforces that every CPT event has to be 2 out of 3. Plus, you get more bang for your buck as well. Just in terms of like, I'm not even talking about like competitive stuff. But if you're like a beginner and you're entering your first tournament, you've just paid like, I don't know, $100 for registration and one game. Making it 3 out of 5 just means you get a bit more time to play the tournament. Like if things don't go well and you go 0-2, at least you'll get a bit more bang for your buck if you get an extra game out of it. So I think 3 out of 5 benefits everyone. It's not just for the competitive players. Thoughts on a Mortal Kombat character? For example, Sub-Zero in Street Fighter 6. I absolutely do not want to see this. I don't want to see any Mortal Kombat characters in this franchise. I don't hate Mortal Kombat. I just don't think that we need to be doing crossovers. I'm kind of sick of crossover characters in fighting games a little bit. Maybe if we were in a situation where there was like 6 DLC characters in a season, like how Street Fighter 5 used to be, then I wouldn't be so against crossover characters. But because the time and effort it takes to develop DLC characters now is so high that most games now are only 4 characters per year, I just don't want those slots going to guest characters, man. I just want Street Fighter characters in Street Fighter. I'm sorry. Next question. How do you like the current CPT qualifying rules? And if not, do you have any suggestions? I don't like the current format. I think the current format is too punishing to players who make the effort to travel. And I also think it's too punishing to certain regions, particularly Japan. So, like, let me explain that real quick. So ZK did some rough mock-ups of, like, how the leaderboard would look right now if it was actually, like, rewarding. Because right now it's winner takes all. That's kind of the issue, is that first place gets the Capcom Cup slot, maybe second place if you're actually at one of the few super premieres, and everyone else is basically fucked, to put it politely. You might get a couple $100 prize money for third or fourth or fifth, but like generally this season is insanely brutal if you don't outright win an event. So like an example here of like why this causes problems, I think, is that if you look at a list like this, I think most people would say this forms a very good lineup for what Capcom Cup should look like. This is what like a pre-COVID CPT list would look like. And I think Ending Walker is probably the good example to point out here. Ending Walker has traveled all around the world this year. He's gone to so many CPT events. He got like third at Evo, which is absolutely insane. Massive result. You know, like this guy is fucking amazing at this game. And he didn't quite get the first place in those events, but he consistently placed insanely high. He would be ranked number 5 in the world right now in a typical leaderboard. And yet, because of this season's format, he can't qualify for Capcom Cup now. Yeah, so I think this format sucks. I think we need to go back to a points-based leaderboard. But I do think we should keep... Before you start yelling at me that I'm taking opportunities away from, like, disadvantaged regions, let me finish. Hold up. Don't beat my ass just yet. I still think we should have online events. I still think we should have World Warriors. Pre-COVID format was too focused on being able to travel. And then we've overcorrected the other way, where now it's too focused on online leaderboards. So, like, we need to meet in the middle somewhere. So, more offline premieres, more points-based rankings, but also do reserve a bunch of spots for World Warriors, right? I think that's reasonable. Hopefully that's the way things go next year. We'll see. Jig D says, so I've been getting the molecular geometry of SF6 confused for a while. I can't seem to remember the amount of electron pairs that go with it. Also, what's up with it being a non-polar molecule despite its polar bonds? What's up with that? And to be honest, like, this is pretty embarrassing, right? You've been in the FGC a long time. This is kind of a scrub quote, you know? Come on, man. We should all know this by now, you know? Sulfur hexafluoride is non-polar because of its symmetrical octahedral molecular geometry. The 6 fluorine atoms are evenly distributed around the central sulfur atom, which means the individual polar SF bonds cancel each other out, so there's a zero net dipole moment in the molecule. Like, come on, man. This is basic stuff. Like, do you guys even know about this? Streamer is obviously reading off a Wikipedia article. You guys think I'm a fake sulfur hexafluoride fan? How wrong you guys are. Hang on. Let me teach you guys a thing or two. Look, all I'm saying is this. Broski at Broski FGC, 13th of October, 2022, by the way, 2-year-old tweet. The sulfur hexafluoride fan base is going to get pissed off when they see what SF6 is doing to their Google search algorithms, alright? Buddy, I was into the sulfur community before you were even born. How do you think my voice got this deep in the first place? I've been fucking with sulfur hexafluoride for years now. Alright, let's move on. Another question. So Femshep asks, how do you untrain a bad reaction alongside training the correct reaction? For example, using the wrong anti-air option at certain ranges. I have to stop always using Gladius and pick the correct air-to-air response, but very hard to identify which anti-air to use on reaction in the moment. So I think this is a problem a lot of people have, like, especially if your character doesn't have, like, a brain-dead, one-size-fits-all anti-air. How do I train myself to use the right anti-air for the right distance? In a real match setting. So, like, I think what I like to do is take it manual at first, right? What you want to do is get yourself into that spacing for the anti-air. And what I like to do is I'll tell myself, I am going to designate 100% of my mental stack right now to using this specific anti-air at this specific angle. So if my opponent does anything else, if my opponent dashes at me, doesn't matter, I'm not going to respond to that. If my opponent throws a fireball, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not looking out for anything else. Right now, I'm just going to put 100% of my focus on this option at this angle. And keep doing that. Even if you get the prediction wrong and they don't jump, that's fine. But you just want to do that for a while, and then slowly, like, start to blend them together. So rather than being like, I'm going to put 100% of my mental stack on this anti-air from this angle, now I'm going to start to, like, ease up a little bit and maybe also focus on the second option from a slightly different angle. Try and, like, slowly integrate it while still making it manual at first. And over time, if you keep doing that, your muscle memory kind of locks in and you'll start automatically associating certain options with certain situations. And you just need to keep doing that until it stops being manual and it just starts being automatic. Like, that's how muscle memory works. All right. What is your opinion on the recent lack of content in the game? New costumes, new colors, new world tour stuff. One of these things is not true. There is plenty of new world tour stuff. You can customize your avatar in ways unthought of. In fact, I'd say the world tour community is eating good right now. It's everyone else that's struggling. Yeah, I think it's a huge mistake. I think it's not an original observation. I think everyone's talked about this at this point. The absolute lack of costumes for the actual characters is shocking to me. And I also think it's kind of sad that Capcom is not communicating either. Like, the entire community is like screaming, please take our money. I've never seen so many people like desperately trying to throw money at a company and them just going, nah, we're not doing that. I mean, I assume that the avatar cosmetic shit must be selling well. That's the only way that I can rationalize the insane state of the cosmetics in this game. But it is insane. Like, even in Street Fighter V, for all of Street Fighter V's flaws, that game had a very good pipeline of costume delivery. Like, I think at this point, there was probably already about 200 Chun-Li costumes. I mean, Street Fighter V had its own issues where waifus would get costume priority. Meanwhile, like, Nikali had like one costume by the end of the game. But even still, at least they had costumes. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a misstep right now. I'm hoping Capcom is cooking something behind the scenes, but until they announce it, we don't know. Alright, so this is pretty relevant based on recent events. So let's talk about tournament setups. Is the PS5 really that bad for tournaments, or is the console and monitor settings to blame? Mind you, I play on a PS5 with 144Hz monitor and hardly notice any difference when switching to PC. So this has been kind of a big topic at the moment, because if you guys saw at the recent Kings of the World CPT, there was a lot of issues people were having with the setups, particularly the stream setup. I think Punk tweeted about it. I think Ending Walker tweeted about it. Quite a few people mentioned that they were having trouble getting basic combos out. You know, as a viewer, I was spectating it. Everyone was dropping combos. It looked very messy. So there was a big, you know, blow up afterwards about like, is the issue PS5 or is it specific parts of the setup? Should we all switch to PC? It's not a new topic. We've done the PS5 versus PC thing before. For me, I think what it comes down to is that PS5 is fine if it's in an optimal condition. So if the PS5 is like not overheating, it's well ventilated, it's set up correctly with input delay reduction turned on, and also it's connected to a monitor that's also set up correctly. I feel like that's the issue that a lot of tournaments have. They will buy or rent hundreds of gaming monitors, stick them on the setup, and then just like turn them on default like factory settings. And unfortunately, default factory settings for a lot of gaming monitors are fucking terrible. And you usually have to do quite a lot of settings adjustment to make them actually quite responsive, or as responsive as they can be. There needs to be more focus on like standardizing every setup. So like, I think what Capcom should do is they should release a guideline for like a standard setup. So they should say like, every setup that's a PS5 has to have these precise settings enabled, and also it has to have this specific monitor with these specific settings. This was a thing, by the way. You guys might have forgotten. In the earlier CPT seasons of Street Fighter V, the CPT was actually partnered with, I can't remember who it was. It was either Bank or Zowie, one of the two. They had a monitor partner for the CPT season, and that meant that there was a completely standardized setup from start to finish. So if you wanted to practice at home, you could literally just buy the exact same combo of monitor and console, and you could match that setup, and then when you go to an event, you wouldn't feel like you're playing on something unfamiliar because there was a standard setup. I do think PC is probably my preferred platform to play on, but if we do have to keep playing on PS5, I would really appreciate if there was a standardized setup, and they were very strict about enforcing it. Okay, let's do another gameplay question. So Serious One asks, when should I use throw escape, considering you can also backdash and jump forward? And this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, because there are a few different anti-throw options in this game. Alright, so if I'm in the corner, let's set up a basic throw situation. Something like this. So my opponent is pressuring me, they do a basic drive rush string, and then they go for a tick throw. And as mentioned, there is basically sort of three major options here you can do as like an active defender. You can either tech the throw, like that, You can backdash the throw, like that, and you can forward jump. And all three of these have use cases, and they sort of, I think what it comes down to for me is like how sure I am that my opponent is going to throw. I think the option you choose should be based on like how confident you are in your defensive read. So for example, if I am 100% certain, without a shadow of a doubt, that my opponent is going to go for a throw here, I would backdash. Because backdash is the only one of these three options which actually gives me a punish here. The others are mostly just sort of evasive options. The backdash actually leaves me in a position where I can punish. So if I know the throw is coming, I can just backdash and then get a punish counter. But it's risky. Like I said, if I'm wrong on that read and I backdash into the corner and my opponent doesn't throw, I might die for it. So only use that one when you're very confident. And then I would say if you're less confident but still reasonably confident that your opponent is probably going to throw, that's where I would switch to delay teching. So let's say that I think my opponent is like, I don't know, 60 or 70% likely to throw here, but I'm not too sure. Then I would probably go for a delay tech. And forward jump is kind of a unique option because this is one that I do when I don't really have a read on my opponent's habits, but I just want to reset to neutral. So what you'll see a lot at high level is... So you'll see this a lot at high level, right? Your opponent will jump out the corner and you will get crosscut. And this might seem like a bad interaction, like you try and jump out the corner and you just get DP'd for it, but actually this is kind of like a... Yeah, it's kind of a health tax, right? Sometimes I will happily take a DP's worth of damage and maybe the Oki situation afterwards in exchange for resetting to the mid-screen. So, like, I'm kind of intentionally forfeiting health here just because I would rather be in this position, facing Ryu's pressure in the middle of the stage, rather than facing it in the corner. So, forward jumping is more of a trading health for position kind of option, when I don't really have a strong read on my opponent's offensive habits. That's the main use case. Also, occasionally, if you forward jump, you might get lucky and you might also get a cross-up punish. But generally, I'm happy to just take the DP here and just go back to the middle of the stage, which is less threatening than the corner. Okay, looking back with the knowledge and stuff we have now of the game, do you think launch SF6 had good balance? I think this is... Good balance is difficult to quantify. What I think is more helpful is if we like compare the first version of SF6 to like previous games. Street Fighter 2, vanilla Street Fighter 2 is completely broken. Street Fighter 3, new generation, one of the worst fighting games ever made. Hated universally, nearly killed the entire Street Fighter franchise. Vanilla Street Fighter 4, heavily unbalanced, you know, vanilla Sagat still haunts people's nightmares. Street Fighter 5 Season 1, you know, 8 frames of lag. Mika was broken, Chun-Li was broken. Street Fighter 6, like Season 1. Luke was too strong. JP was too strong. A couple of characters were too strong. But if you compare that, the state of Street Fighter 6 Season 1 to those previous examples that I mentioned, it is absolutely the most balanced launch Street Fighter ever. It wasn't necessarily balanced, like I said, the balance wasn't great in Season 1, but like compared to the series historically, I think it's the most balanced launch version, but that's not saying a whole lot. But that being said, losing 60% of my health because Luke pressed crouch medium punch anywhere on the screen was not much fun. Okay. Do I think that if the MR system was to distribute points after the set, first to 2, rather than after the first to 1, the system would be more accurate? A lot of people don't like the fact that MR like changes hands after every single game. So there are situations where, say, I can beat a player, I'll gain like 2 points, I'll lose the next game, lose like 12 points, and then win the third game, win 2 points, and I'm at a net result of -8 MR, even though I won the set. And so a lot of people have suggested that MR should only be redistributed after the first to 2, and I don't actually agree with that. It's frustrating, I will agree with that. It's definitely frustrating winning the set, but watching your MR go down sometimes. But you just have to think of this from like a purely clinical perspective, okay? Consider two players, right? Player number one wins every single game 2-0. They play 100 games in a row. They win every single one 2-0. Player number two plays the exact same matchup list. They play the exact same players, and they win every single set 2-1. Now, my question for you guys, which of those two players is better? The guy that wins 2-0 100 times in a row, or the guy who wins 2-1 100 times in a row? It's up for debate. I think the player winning 2-0 is the better of those two players. That's just my opinion. Even if you win the set, if your actual game-to-game score is better, you are the better player. What are your thoughts on projectile drive rush? I think it's fine. I think it should be encouraged. I think Capcom should never change it. My opinion on this may be somewhat skewed by the fact that I play the character with some of the best fireball drive rush approach in the game. So I may not be the most objective opinion haver on this one. But I will say, to my credit, I don't find fireball drive rush annoying when I'm on the receiving end, except for Guile. Aki's fireball has a ton of recovery, so I feel like you can play around it more. The only time that I find fireball drive rush really obnoxious is against Guile. But generally, I don't really mind it. You know, Ken has a good fireball drive rush with EX, DJ has it, Aki has it, Jury has it. I don't find those ones very annoying, but I do think Guile's is a little bit frustrating. But generally, I don't have too much of a problem with it. I don't think it's like game breaking or anything. As an analog stick user, why do you use it? Feels like it's the least accurate input method, levelless arcade stick D-pad. Is it just because you're used to it, or do you find it advantageous? Asking as an analog user myself. So I know everyone reacts with disgust and horror when they find out that I play on the analog stick. So here's the thing, it is just what you're used to, right? I have used analog stick since the very first day that I started playing fighting games. Occasionally, I will actually switch my thumb over to the D-pad for dashing. Like in SF4, I used to do FADCs with the D-pad. I would do the DP on the analog stick, and then double tap forward to dash, because dashing is definitely easier on D-pad. But I'm just too used to it now. I've played fighting games on analog stick for many, many years, so it just feels natural to me. I don't think analog stick is optimal. I do agree that if you're playing on pad, you probably should be using the D-pad. I think D-pad probably is better. But there are a lot of players that play on analog stick. Like, I feel like people don't realize how many pad players at like a pro level are playing on analog stick. NuckleDo uses the analog stick sometimes. Phenom out here in Europe, he plays on pad with the analog stick. Ending Walker plays on the analog stick. So Dual Kevin does too. Okay. There are dozens of us. It's not just me. I guess I got a lot of questions about this, so like, I'm just gonna group them under this one. I think about 5 people asked the same question here. I'm just gonna group this one together. So, if Oro returned to SF6, would you drop Aki? And I've also had the same question about Hugo, and just generally about like how I would change my approach if certain DLC characters came out. And I get asked this on stream a lot as well. I cannot ever commit to any kind of character switch until I have played them extensively. It's just that simple. I love Oro in Street Fighter V, but that is no guarantee that I would like him in Street Fighter 6. For me, what makes a character fun is like a very specific set of conditions lining up with their gameplay and their matchups and the system mechanics of that game. And there's plenty of situations where I might love a character in one game and then hate them in the next game. For example, Dalsim. I like Dalsim a lot in Street Fighter V. I hate the way he plays in Street Fighter 6. He feels heavy to me. His movement feels sluggish. His normals feel awkward. I don't like his anti-airs in this game. I liked Dalsim a lot in Street Fighter V. I played him for like 5 years. Street Fighter 6 drops, I played Dalsim for like 48 hours and dropped him because I just did not like the way he played. So I would like to see Oro come back, but I could never commit to switching until I actually tested him out in this game. If I don't know the frame data, how do I tell when it's my turn? If I don't know how to read, how am I supposed to enjoy this book? Like, what? The way you learn frame data is by learning frame data. Well, I don't get it. I guess you can play by feel and trial and error and just mash on every move until you figure out which one's a plus and which one's a negative, but like, it's not that hard to learn frame data. I know some people like to talk about it like it's some massive studying that you have to do for this game. Like, I think that the thing is, what I recommend people do, if I just take this seriously for a second, what I recommend people do is don't try and remember numbers for everything, because people don't know frame data the way they think they do. I still make mistakes about my own character. Case in point, earlier today in the stream, I said that Aki's cower crouch roll is -2 on block, and then I put it into training mode and I realized it's -3. But the thing is, I don't really think in terms of numbers when it comes to frame data. Generally, the best way to do it is just safe, punishable with a light, punishable with a medium, punishable with a heavy, right? That's the way that I kind of remember moves. So rather than remembering if something is like +6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever, I find it much easier to just group things into like, this is safe, but it's not my turn. This is punishable with a jab. This is punishable with medium punch. So I just kind of categorize things generally with like 4 levels of punish. And that covers most scenarios. Obviously, you do want to actually learn the exact numbers, and the more that you study this game, the more you do remember actually the correct numbers on things. But there's still tons of things I don't know. Like, if you asked me to sit down and like list the frame data for every character, I would have huge blind spots. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter sometimes. You know, some supers in this game, you block a super, it might be -30 on block. You block a different super, it might be -26. But fundamentally, for most cases, there is basically no difference between a move being -30 and -26. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much initially about knowing the precise numbers for a lot of things, but just sort of categorize them like that. It's helpful. How do you do a crosscut DP, and are there any tips to make it come out more consistently? Okay, I like this. This has got a straightforward answer. Alright, so just a reminder, if you don't already know, a crosscut DP is just a DP that you do to beat cross-ups. So it's a DP that you do if your opponent is jumping behind your head. And the way you do it is like this. So the motion that you want to do, and this is particularly if you're playing on something like an analog stick or an arcade stick, but it's the same input basically on other control methods, is forward, down, down back, and punch, or whatever input for your DP. You want to make sure you stop at down back. That is the #1 bit of advice I have. A lot of people try and do a crosscut with a half circle, and this happens. There we go. A lot of people try and do it, like, if you do it with a half circle, it can work sometimes, but I don't recommend it because sometimes you can get accidental Hadoken, and sometimes you can get accidental Hashirageki, for example, with Ryu. So if you want your crosscuts to be more consistent, and also you want to stay crouching so that you can do them later, you want to make sure that you end the input at down back, like you can see in the top left-hand corner. I guess you can also do that. You can do like wiggling between down forward and down back. But I don't like this. This feels very inconsistent. I would recommend not doing that. I would just stick to ending at down forward or down back, depending on which side you're on. Also, just generally, I would recommend doing the input slower than you would expect. I think when I've had people asking me for advice on crosscuts, a lot of people are rushing it. They're like, they see the jump and they panic and they're like, oh god, and then they do something like that. You want to aim to be pressing down back just as they get behind your head. I think we're gonna wrap things up there. Obviously I got 8 million questions, so I'm sorry if I couldn't get around to everyone, but hopefully that was helpful for some of you guys. And I will see you guys all in the next video.